everyone, and welcome back to another episode on Unbox Tech Bytes. This is the second part of the Corsair 1000D monster build, so if you haven't already caught the first part of this mini-series, then do use the link above to watch from the beginning. For those of you that are new to the channel, welcome, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If I could just ask if you could like and subscribe to this video, then that would be very much appreciated. So, as I said, we are picking up in part 2, and in this episode we're going to cover the wiring of Corsair's maglev RGB Pro fans from the 120mm range up to the 140mm variants, and we're also going to cover the installation of the components on the motherboard and also the installation of the motherboard into the case. Now, with 21 fans in this build, there was always going to be a heck of a lot of wiring. As for each of those fans, there are 2 cables. One for the lighting and the other for fan speed control. So starting off, we already have 42 wires to hook up, and as I wanted the ability to control each PWM fan individually, I opted to use 4 of Corsair's Command Pros, one of which already came installed in the case, so I'd only need to source another 3, and I would also need 4 of Corsair's Lightning nodes. Luckily, they also came bundled with the packs of fans I purchased. To make life easier for myself, I ended up labelling all of the wires to make the connecting side a lot easier, and I really do thank myself for that. It probably saved me at least half an hour toing and froing and finding which cables link to which fan to go into which hub that I created. The Command Pros can all be linked together using one of the 2 USB headers on the Command Pros, and the other header I used to connect the Lightning nodes. To make things easier, I ended up sticking the Lightning node onto the controller, and that way it helped me keep track of what wires were going where into which hub. With all of the products being Corsair, the IQ software had no issue loading these straight up and ready for my personalisation. I will however cover more on the IQ software at the end of this video in the summary, or if people are interested I can also do a separate episode on this too, as the software is quite in depth. Now you can already see that the cable management part of this is hectic. Luckily, the Corsair 1000D case gives you plenty of room to accomplish this, since it can hold 2 full IPX systems, and with the handy amount of cable and zip ties, it really wasn't too bad overall. As we break away from the wiring, we're going to be adding the various components into our motherboard next. The motherboard in question is Asus's flagship motherboard for the AM5 socket, of Asus ROG Crosshair X670E Extreme, and we're going to be loading this up with Ryzen 9 7950X CPU, which at the time of writing is currently the most powerful CPU on the market. Next to that we have our 4 DIMM slots for our DDR5 RAM. We're going to be putting all 4 sticks in of Corsair's Dominator DDR5, and this clocks in at 5600 MHz with a total of up to 128GB spread across those 4 DIMM channels. This is maxing out the capabilities of the motherboard that can only handle up to 128 across the 4 DIMM channels, but to be honest, I have a feeling that's going to be plenty for myself. And as we start moving down the board, we come to our heatsink area. Once we remove this will allow us to gain access to our M.2 NVMe slots. And a few years ago I was tempted by Samsung's offerings, and I've been with Samsung ever since. I've had many variants over the years in both the standard SATA SSDs as well as the M.2s, but after the recent debacle and issue with the 990 Pro, I've gone back to Western Digital with their leading PCIe 4 SN850X, as I'm still waiting for the PCIe 5 SSDs to come to market. They were meant to be at the end of 2022, but yeah, at this time of writing in February 23, there are still none on the market. The SN850X has levelled the playing field against the SK Hynix and Samsung's offerings, and it will be really good to compare between my new build and my older build on the X570E chipset, which was just the standard below one that we're installing today. Next up from that, we have our CPU water block to install. Again, I went with Corsair for this one, using their XC7 RGB Pro. Has a nice simplistic design, and I'm hoping with the cloudy coolant I plan on adding, this should provide a nice aesthetic to the build. Now before we install this, we're going to have to remove the thermal paste that's already come applied, and we're going to add our own. When it comes to thermal paste, there is only one that I will ever turn to, and that is the Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut. This product's made by DeBauer, who's a German modder, and has the potential to bring down temperatures as much as 10 degrees C, which is a massive gain for anyone who is overclocking. It's not cheap, but it certainly kicks the arse off the other competitors out there. This block supports the AM4, AM5, 1700 and the 1200 series motherboards, and thankfully all I needed to do was remove the retention blocks that are already preloaded on the motherboard, and then swap out the fitting ring on the block itself and secure it down to the motherboard. Nice straightforward process and done within seconds. Before I went any further, I felt like I needed to reconfigure the rear slots to allow for a vertical graphic card installation. As it turns out, I didn't actually need to do this in the end, as there's another section closer to the glass where I will be installing this later down the line. But we live and learn through this process, and this is the first time I've been working with this case. Now, before we put the motherboard in its place, we're going to need to install some of the standoffs for the E80X motherboard. There's 9 of them in total that we'll need to install, so we'll pop that in and then we will load up the motherboard. And for those 9 standoffs, we have our 9 screws to go in there. As you can see, I start with the most difficult one first, and then I go around the diagonals, and then I fill in the rest. Now, this is the end of the video for part 2. I do hope you've enjoyed it. We have part 3 coming out shortly. As I did mention earlier, if you could please take a moment to like and subscribe to the video, that'd be amazing. You guys have a great day. I'll catch you soon. Bye bye.